A jury is now deciding the wrongful death civil suit filed by Michael Jackson's family. They got the case on Thursday and deliberated all day yesterday. The Jackson family is suing concert promoter AEG, saying it was negligent in hiring Dr. Conrad Murray. Well, promoters are arguing that Jackson hid his drug addiction and they had no way of knowing about it. With me now is our friend and criminal defense lawyer, Joey Jackson. Good to see you on a Saturday, Joey.
Great to see you, Susan.
Let's talk about this trial. Lasted 5 months. So how do jurors kind of sort through everything they've processed during the testimony?
Very methodically, Susan. Now, fortunately, they have a verdict sheet. And in that verdict sheet, it pretty clearly lists out the things that they have to determine, like what? First, they have to reach a conclusion as to whether or not AEG actually hired Conrad Murray. And then, of course, after they do that, they have to then move on to assess Conrad Murray's conduct. Was his negligence a contributing factor to Michael Jackson's death? Even before reaching that, Susan, was he indeed negligent? And so they keep going down the line, and provided that they answer yes to those questions, then of course you get to the big numbers, and that's the very big issue here in terms of the billions of dollars that there's exposure for with AEG.
Yeah, a whole lot of money that AEG could be paying. Joey, the lawyers got their last chance in closing arguments, some very powerful ones on both sides. I want to listen to a little bit and then we'll talk about it.
They'll come up here and accept no responsibility and put it all on Michael, Mrs. Jackson, Karen Fay, Alif Sankey, everybody but them. And when you're pointing the finger at someone, you got 4 fingers pointing back at yourself. And responsibility, it doesn't stop at the boardroom.
Mr. Jackson was nearly $500 million in debt. It was Mr. Jackson, not AEG Live, that chose Dr. Conrad Murray. He was a grown man. You can't save someone. They have to save themselves.
So that was Brian Panish for the Jackson family, Marvin Putnam for AEG. Did either side, Joey, score big in closing arguments? I guess it all boils down to what the jurors believe happened.
Always does, Susan, always does. Now, I think they both were effective, but here's the issue, because there's 2 diametrically opposed views. If you're AEG, it's about personal responsibility and secrets in the privacy of your own home. How are we to know what you're doing? Of course, if you're Michael Jackson, it's about pushing him to the door of death and then, of course, allowing him to go through because you didn't monitor, you didn't detect, you didn't protect him. And then those are the things that, of course, the jury has to evaluate. Now, interestingly, Susan, as you know, because it's a civil case, you need 9, not the entire 12. And, of course, the standard of proof is not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's more likely than not, preponderance of the evidence standard. So there's a lot for the jury to consider, and we remain glued to find out what their consideration is going to be.
Yeah, we're used to covering criminal trials. It's much different here. In your mind, is there one key issue? I believe that Jackson family side is saying, look, we have these emails, smoking guns, if you will, from AEG. But AEG, as you said, is saying, look, Michael Jackson died because of bad choices that he made. So I guess it will depend now, while the jury is deliberating, what they believe.
So true, Susan. And I think, what we have to also keep in mind, as you rightly point out, the diametric views here, is that even if, when you're playing the blame game, in this case, even if the jury concludes that Michael Jackson was somewhat to blame, they could still hold AEG liable because, remember, California is a comparative negligence state. What does that mean? We both could be negligent, but if I'm 50% and you're 50%, what do? Instead of giving me $2 billion, you give me 1. And so there could still be exposure, even though the blame game is being played.
Yeah, still a whole lot of money could go to the Jackson family.
Whole lot.
Joey, appreciate it. Good to see you. Thanks.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Susan.